Hey guys, John at Frosty Pine Labs here. Today we're out in the bush. We have some ballistics gel and we're going to test the penetration on some 22 LR rounds today. So first I'm going to test them on the chronograph, make sure we actually get what the boxes say we're going to get, see how those go, and then we're going to put it into the gel and look at the wound cavity as well as penetration. I have my vernier here, I have my tape measure here, and my GoPro. So we'll see if we can get some slow-mo footage, watch the bullets in action, and go from there. All right, first up we have the Lapua 22 super long range. I'm excited to see where these ones go. I don't see a grain or a speed on here, but I guess we'll shoot it and see how it goes. All right, next up we have the Winchester Varman H coming in at 1435 feet per second. It's a 37 grain, expanding 3-1 segmentation. Next up we have the 22 Remington Viper. It's a flat nose, gonna hard punch. I think we're gonna see a little more penetration and expansion out of this one, so excited to see what happens. We also have the Winchester Silver Tip 22, 37 grain. It's also segmenting. It's gonna split, break up into little bits here, and we're gonna see how this is a self-defense round. It's made for handguns. We're gonna be firing it of a rifle today. We're gonna see how that goes. Now today I have two subsonics here. I have the Sniper Subsonic by Aguila. It's the 60 grain. It's a pretty long round. It's going 650 feet a second, or sorry, 950 feet a second. So we're going to see how this one does. And then we have the segmenting 22 by CCI. I'm not sure how this is going to perform. It says it's 710 feet per second, but a segmenting hollow point. So if we see expansion on this, I'm going to be significantly impressed. Let's see how it goes. Now I decided to shoot out of an old Kui rifle that I decided to fix up. I just fixed it up the other day here. So what it is it's a long barrel, so we're getting actual velocities that we're supposed to get for these bullets. All of them are designed for rifle except for the one handgun round, but that performed flawlessly out of the rifle as well. So I think as long as you're not shooting too low, like maybe the Aguila Calibri or something like that, as far as feet per second, you're probably going to be fine. But for testing, I usually recommend the long barrel. Maybe next week we'll do a video on a short barrel, see if we're getting the same sort of reaction, or same sort of results here. Hey guys, so my chronograph battery ran out of battery, so we're gonna have to do that on another day here. First we're going up with the Remington Viper 22 into the gel here. I don't see a speed on them, and I don't see a grain on them, but we'll see how they go. All right, next we have the Lapua 22 LR super long range. Again, I don't see a grain on these guys or a speed, but I guess we'll find out how deep they penetrate here. All right, so pretty close to where the other one was. They almost intersected, but didn't. You can see the Lapua extra long range, very straight, didn't break. It sort of made a straight line right through and punched out the other end, straight on through. Next we have the Winchester HE high velocity 22. It's a segmenting tip, so it's going to break into 3 pieces, and hopefully we're able to see that in the gel here at those speeds. All right, so the high velocity varmint is an interesting round. Oh, that one's blocking the view. We can see back there, the petals did break off. We see 1, 2, 3 petals, and the projectile was caught here. It looks to be about 13 inches of penetration into the block. Looking good. All right, next up we have the Winchester Silver Tip. They're the 37 grain. They're going to split as well, so we're going to see how well they perform up against the the Winchester high velocity varmint. All right, guys, we're walking out to check this bad boy out. Let's see how it goes. Here's the new, oh, interesting. Here's the new segmented tip here. So we see, oh, it has like near perfect separation. We're about 4 inches in. We have 3 perfectly separated petals, and we continue to go for about 14 and a half inches. We've encased it there. You also have some mean wound cavity at the end as well. So that round really lives up to its name. It has that stopping power right into that wound cavity at the end there, with a solid amount of penetration as well. Next up, we have an interesting round. Oh, it's hot out here today. It's about 38, maybe 39, 40 Celsius. I don't know what that is in freedom units, but she's warm. Next up, we have the 40 grain, 710 foot per second small game segmented hollow tip by CCI here. So it's a definitely subsonic. We're going to see if it can actually pedal and split at those speeds. All right, we're going to put it in the lower corner. We see on this round, again, actually it went in about twice as far, and then see the pedals? I'm impressed that the subsonic pedals went further, almost twice as far as the self-defense rounds. And the, where is the projectile? Oh, that's as deep as it goes. That's the entire thing. That's the end. So one of the pedals stuck to the projectile, 2 split off. Quite impressive performance for a subsonic round. All right, so as we can see, that one went all the way in as well. That one maybe penetrated about 13 inches, which is impressive for a subsonic round. You can see it all stayed together there. It didn't really mushroom out. When I get home here, I'll cut these open and measure the diameter, see what sort of expansion we got out of the 22 there. All right, guys, so we're back at home now, and we're gonna take a look at what the bullets did inside the block a little bit closer. We'll see if we can cut them open and measure diameter as well. So the first round we're looking at was our Remington 22 Viper. It's a 36 grain projectile, and it's moving at 1,410 feet per second. So when I shot this from about 10 yards, granted not that far, it passed completely through the block. So as you can see, we go a little closer. The first round we shot just went straight through, very little cavitation. Well, you're expecting that for a 22, but a small cavitation, straight through, not a lot of expansion, and it did exactly what it's supposed to do. So very impressive little round out of that guy. All right, so next up we have the Lapwood 22LR super long range. I couldn't find stats on these for how fast they're going or for how many grains the projectile is. I guess I could weigh it, and I guess I'm going to do that in the next step when we check expansion. But oh, actually, it also passed right through the block, so we're not even going to check expansion on this guy. So as you can see, this guy, it did have some cavitation in the middle, so it went in. It went pretty fast, and we see this middle. I don't know if it started to tumble or what happened here, but as we go a little further down, we see more expansion and then out. So I'm not sure if that bullet is tumbled or if it just, that's sort of the power behind that going through it. I assume it is a high velocity round because it is super long range, but it also, now with 22 long range, you could have subsonic. People prefer to shoot subsonic 22 long range just because as you break through the sound barrier, your bullet's gonna wiggle, and it's going to make your bullet less accurate. So I know some long range shooters use subsonic, but these definitely don't feel subsonic, especially passing through with as little resistance as it did. So super good little round. All right, so next up we have the Winchester HE Varmint. This projectile is going at 1,435 feet a second, and it's a 37 grain bullet. So we see this one performed actually pretty nicely. I'll pull my tape measure out here. We see that it went in and expanded perfectly. It broke into 3 petals, so at exactly about 4 inches for all 3 of the petals we see here, perfect expansion. And the base projectile kept going. So we see that here at about 12.5 inches further down the track here. Now we see the projectile is captured here at about 12.5 inches of penetration. So it worked exactly how we wanted it to. It is a high velocity round, over 1,400 feet a second. Nice expansion on the petals. They did break out into the 3, and we do have that forward penetration, as I said, about 12.5 inches in there. So solid performance out of the round. Next up, we have the Winchester Silver Tips. Now this was my personal favorite performance out of the rounds that we tested today. So we see, again with the trusty old tape measure, we have about at 4 inches, or at about 3.5 inches, we have total separation of the 3 petals, which is exactly what we want. And then we have the remainder of the projectile, the back end, going in at about 13.5 inches. 15 inches. 15 inches here. You can see there's a pretty good cavitation bubble at the end where the projectile is caught, and it just looks like straight damage all the way through. So this is a self-defense round. It's a hollow point, segmenting, and it performed exactly as it said. We had the deepest penetration of any projectile of the segmenting round still trapped in the block. So super good performance out of this guy here. All right, next we have the CCI Quiet 22 segmented hollow point rounds. Now these are small game rounds. They're 40 grains and they're only traveling 710 feet per second. So very, very slow round as far as projectiles go at 710 feet per second. I was actually quite surprised at this round. I wasn't expecting full expansion, especially going 710 feet per second, but it proved me wrong. So as you can see here, we come in and these pellets are quite close. They stopped fully at, let me pull my tape measure out, just under 6 inches, about 6 inches, all the petals here. So you can see perfect expansion. There was no back projectile, so it's all staying within those 3 petals there. Now what's interesting about the subsonic round is compared to the other 2 high velocity rounds, the segmenting rounds at least, it's penetrated like double the distance, the subsonic. So we have 3 to 4 inches on these petals, and 5 to 6 inches on those petals from the subsonic. So quite impressive performance. Granted, there's no back projectile to penetrate further in like we saw the 13 and 15 inches earlier. But for that, this is exactly what you want out of a small game round. You want it to go in, do its damage, and be done. So this is a quite impressive performance out of the subsonic, and it surprised me. Nice to see. Next up, we have the Aguila Subsonic. It's the Aguila Sniper Subsonic in 22. It's a 60 grain projectile, so it's a very hefty projectile with a short brass, something I don't see that often in 22 LR, but it is going 950 feet a second, so it is subsonic as well, but a pretty hefty grain round. And as we can see here, we come in, it's come all the way through to here. Let me measure, just over a foot, about 12.5, no, at 12 inches it looks like here. You can see it's gone through, and there's a bit of cavitation. The bullet actually tumbled and went backwards. So you can see it's facing backwards, I believe, in there. We're going to cut it open in a minute and find out for sure, but it doesn't look like it expanded. It looks like it's just straight penetration for, as I said, about a foot there going in. So impressive out of that as well. For subsonic, it has nice penetration, so even though it's very quiet, not a terrible round at all, if that's what you're looking for. So now we're going to cut out some of these bullets and just check for expansion. So we're going to measure the original round in diameter, and then we're going to measure the round that we pull out in diameter. It's not perfectly scientific, but it is going to let us know if we're seeing any expansion from these rounds. So not all of them we're going to test. We may test the petal off of one of the expanding or one of the segmenting rounds, one of the butt pieces from one of the segmenting rounds, a subsonic, and another round here as well. So we'll pull out maybe 3 and measure them, see how it goes, and maybe a leaf or 2 off of the petals. All right, so first out comes the handy dandy vernier caliper. We're gonna measure diameter on here. So we're at 2.24 inches-ish. So I've already taken the liberty to cut this a bit. Try to get the rest of it open here. There we go. And here is our subsonic round. It was backwards. I don't see any flattening on the projectile itself. Let's see what we're at. According to this, it is a little thinner. It's at 2.14, 2.13, 2.14. So we lost like 1/10 of an inch, interestingly enough. Maybe just thinning out and being pushed through. But you can see how substantial it is for a 22 round coming out of the short brass there. Next up, we have the Winchester silver tip. So we have the expansion there, as I mentioned, and then we have the butt of the projectile down here. So I'm going to take my handy dandy, what kind of knife is this? Moranil, Moraknil. Seems to be sharp. It's a cheap knife. It does the job here. Ballistics gel is fairly tricky to cut, so I like to pull apart as I cut it like this. See if we can get in there. There we go. So I'm into the hole here. We can see the round right here. Perfect. So on this round, we actually see those petals did come off, and it did mushroom fairly significantly, which is what we want to see out of a self-defense round like this. So we can see against the normal round. Let me get it out here. So that is the back piece here, and the petals have come off. So just to measure with the vernier here, on the unexpanded round, we're at 2.245, and on the expanded round, we've actually mushroomed out quite a bit, more than I thought a 22 would. We're at about 2.6 inches, so we got a fair amount of expansion out of it. Impressive little self-defense round for sure. So next up we have that CCI segmented hollow point. So it just broke into the 3 pieces. We're going to cut out this piece here closest to the surface and just see what these things did. Oh wow. So I mentioned that I was wondering why there was no back projectile. Like on the last one we had just looked at, you can see how there's that back piece on there. Now, I guess this segmenting hollow point, the entire projectile splits into 3, so there is no back piece. You can see this is curled over and quite long. So it's actually split into 3 completely, and there is no back piece. So complete penetration and complete expansion on that round. Quite impressive out of a little subsonic. All right, so the last one we're going to pull out and measure here and actually look at is the Varman HE. So we had those petals blow out here. All 3 of them expanded perfectly. And then we have the end of the projectile here. So as we come into the gel here, we see it. And that is the projectile that we pulled out for the Varman HE after the 3 petals have been left. Now, interestingly enough, this is the other one from Winchester after it expanded. They look identical as far as how they've expanded out, except for the self-defense round seems to have a little more beef behind it. And that would make sense, as we saw an extra maybe 1.5 inches of penetration with that round. So just to measure it against the baseline, we have our Varman HE round. Let me zero the vernier. And we're at 2.2 inches there on that guy. And after we've pulled it out here, we are at about 2.76. So we actually have a little more expansion out of this one. Even though it didn't go as deep, we have a little bit more mushroom. So something to keep in mind. I was wondering to myself what the difference between these 2 rounds are, because to be honest, the silver tip, 37 grain plated, 22 LR segmenting into 3, and the Winchester Varman 37 grain, shooting at the same feet per second, 1435. I thought maybe this was just the exact same round, to be honest. But we do see a little bit of difference. We see about 1.5 inches more penetration with the silver tip, and we see a little bit more expansion on the butt end piece on the Varman HE. So there is a discernible difference, which surprised me. So what we saw was quite impressive results from some of these rounds in 22. I do think my favorite performance out of it was the silver tip, followed by the Winchester Varman H. Now that being said, that's for that purpose. Small game or self-defense, you're really going to see a nice result from those guys. Things like the punch, the super long range. The super long range was very like accurate coming out of the 22, and it passed through without an issue. So I'm really excited to do another video testing those out at long range and seeing what we can get out of them. So depending on what you're looking for, this is a solid grasp on sort of what you can expect out of these, at least from 10 yards. We'll do another video out at 100 and just see if we're getting the same kind of results out of them here. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully this has given you a good idea of the different rounds you may be looking at and how they're going to perform at least at 10 yards. We'll shoot another video and see how much further out we can go with it. So hopefully this information was helpful. If you could please like and subscribe, that would definitely help get the word out on my videos. Appreciate it, and see you next time on Frosty Pine Labs.